So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with My Hero Academia. So let's start the series. That was all Pink Ninja could think of as she tried to unwind. Why was she nervous, you ask? She was nervous about the Yi entrance exam, but her parents encouraged her to pursue her goals, and her friends had faith in her since her peculiarity aided her in most circumstances. Pink Ninja had already been accepted to Ketsubutsu Academy and wanted to try to get into Yui, even though Naruto and his friend were enrolled in another, similarly good academy. Pink Ninja thought that because Yui had the best nurse, she would learn how to manage her quirk more effectively there than anywhere else. Her mind was racing as she stepped through the doorway and approached the massive structure. A few feet behind her, Pink Ninja heard a ruckus and halted. A boy with wild green hair caught her attention, grinning and making odd noises. She somewhat covered her lips as he appeared to be quite delighted and funny. She couldn't contain her laughter. Pink Ninja was staring at the figure, who was dressed in an unfamiliar school uniform, when she realized she still hadn't offered an apology for her actions. Without turning her head, she strode forward, her eyes widening, and she soon turned to face another individual. Each individual studied the other in silence, and Pink Ninja was taken aback to be confronting someone with a bird-shaped head. As she examined him, she noticed that his dark, feathered head contrasted with bright red eyes. He was just as tall as she was, if not slightly shorter. "Oh God, I am so sorry for my behavior. I did not mean to stare or bump into you," the Pink Ninja replied, bowing deeply. "No problem," the man said after giving her a lengthy look, and then he entered the building, making Pink Ninja realize she would be late. Ironically, she walked and sat down next to the Birdman, moaning as she did so. She went in and hit her forehead with her palm. Pink Ninja sighed and turned to face the center of the stage, where other students still occupied the majority of the seats. She glanced at the seats right next to her and saw that the right one was still unoccupied. Pink Ninja turned to the left and smiled awkwardly at the man, but he merely gazed back, perhaps waiting for her to introduce herself. She raised her hand for him to shake. "Hello, I suppose we're seated next to each other. My name is Pink Ninja," she said. "Tokoyami Fumikage, pleasure," he said, shaking her hands and remaining silent for a moment. They warmed up to each other right away in the little time given. He was one of the few students from his school to try out for Yui, Pink Ninja found out. A pro hero took the podium and put an end to their conversation. The building fell silent as President Mike said, "Welcome one and all to my live show. Everybody say he." The audience was clearly too nervous to speak. "I've got shivers down my spine too, listeners. All right, examinees, I'm gonna give you the lowdown on how this'll go down. Are you ready?" he said, calling out, "Yeah," as the students all fell silent. However, Pink Ninja turned to face the source when she heard weak mumblings and saw that the same green-haired youngster was unintelligibly whispering strange words. Pink Ninja glanced back to Present Mike and listened to him speak while glancing down at her handout. "Now pay close attention, listeners. We'll be testing your mettle by running a 10-minute practice run at our replica city district. You can take whatever you like. Everybody gather at the designated meeting area after the presentation, you dig? Okay," he continued by outlining the challenge. "We'll be sprinkling a large number of villains over the battlefield, and they'll appear in 3 different varieties, with point values scaled according to difficulty. Using each of your individual quirks, dispatch as many villains as you can. Your goal, listeners, is to rack up a high score. And don't think about directly attacking any other competitors or any of that nasty anti-hero stuff, because that's against the rules, capice?" "Excuse me, may I ask a question? On the handout, there are clearly 4 types of villains listed. Such an error would be the height of embarrassment for a top-tier National Academy of Yui's caliber. The reason we are seated here today is because we seek guidance on the path to becoming model heroes," he replied after completing the exam. Pink Ninja recognized him in some manner because he was wearing glasses and seemed quite serious. He glared at the green-haired child before the child apologized. Moreover, what's with you? Can't you sit still for a second? You're distracting. If you think ye is some pleasure jaunt, then leave this place at once, he said. Okay, thanks for the surg, much appreciated. Examinee 7111. The fourth type of villain you'll encounter is worth 0 points. Let's call them arena traps. Have any of you ever played Super Mario Bros. Before? You remember those things that'd go thwomp on you? There's a thing like that in each area. Their gimmick is that they rampage when crowded. President Mike interrupted the discussion when nobody replied. When examinee 7111 realized his inquiry had been addressed, he bowed and apologized for being rude. After giving him a quick glance, Pink Ninja stepped into the center of the stage. Well, that's enough from me. I'll lead you all with a presentation on the school precepts of this academy of mine. As a certain hero by the name of Napoleon Bonaparte once said, "A true hero never ceases conquering the hardships in life," said President Mike as he wrapped up his remarks. Now let's move to the main event. Plus Ultra. With a sigh, Pink Ninja trailed behind the group she was meant to be with. To her astonishment, she discovered Tokoyami standing at the gate by himself as she turned to check if she could spot him anywhere. Since it was so rare, she considered herself lucky to know someone in her exam section. When he glanced in her direction, Pink Ninja smiled broadly, and she rushed up to him in the hopes of talking to him before the test, but things did not go as planned when she encountered another man. She saw that he had red hair that was spiked when he turned to smile at her. She hurried to Tokoyami, muttering an apology. Tokoyami nodded to her when she eventually stopped right next to him. Tokoyami just nodded as Pink Ninja started chattering anxiously about the test. Pink Ninja looked at Tokoyami as the microphone started to switch on. Good luck. I hope you pass, remarked Pink Ninja, with an uncomfortable smile. Tokoyami glanced at the girl and then smiled slightly. Good luck as well, San. A voice yelled, "Start," and drove Pink Ninja toward the gate before she knew what was happening. As she proceeded farther into the city simulation, she saw a 2-point villain coming around a corner. Pink Ninja used her quirk to slightly enhance her muscles and hit the robot after preparing her arm and shifting her weight into a martial arts position. Her blow caused the villain to malfunction even though it wasn't strong enough to destroy it. As she proceeded to earn points in this manner, buildings started to fall apart as the arena traps moved forward and destroyed structures. Pink Ninja's eyes widened as the villain approached the imprisoned children, but sadly, the redhead she had met earlier was buried beneath the debris and some other pupils. She glanced around for a moment and saw that Tokoyami was still there with his oddity, so she chose to. Pink Ninja shouted, "Tokoyami-kun, help me get the rubble off the students," in an attempt to gain his attention. Tokoyami nodded and gave her a quick glance before the arena trap could get to the pupils. Pink Ninja hauled them out after he lifted the debris off of them using his quirk. The redhead was the last to be saved, and they kept doing this until every pupil was secure. He couldn't turn around and shatter the rubble, but he seemed to be trying to use his peculiarity. He stumbled into Pink Ninja's arms and murmured, "Sorry about this, I think I twisted my ankle," as they helped him get away from the rubble. She appeared stunned. The Pink Ninja bit her lip and whispered, "Don't worry about it, let's just get out of here. Tokoyami-kun, are you alright?" as she looked up to see the robot getting closer to their location. Until they heard the countdown reach 0, the three of them made their way to safety. With a moan, Pink Ninja let the man sit down and knelt down in front of him to check his wound. "I am fine, we should get out," she said. "Hey, thanks for saving me back there," he added, grinning weakly. Pink Ninja said, "No problem, can I take a look at your ankle?" as she looked into his eyes. He boldly lifted his pant leg to let Pink Ninja see it, and Tokoyami leaned in to look at it too, She glanced up for a response, and when he nodded, she carefully grasped the ankle. She asked, "Is it okay if I touch it?" The crimson head hissed softly when Pink Ninja turned it in the incorrect direction. She blurted out an apology and breathed in and out until her peculiarity was revealed. Others noticed the disturbance due to the glowing of her hand, and she started to treat the redhead's wound until it was all gone. Then she released her hold and stood up so he could check his ankle. He smiled and got up to give her a bone-crushing hug. "Thank you, stranger. I'm glad you are here to help me out. The name's Kirishima Aizuru," he replied. After he released her, she studied his small features for a moment before speaking. "My name is Pink Ninja. It is a pleasure to meet you." The Pink Ninja turned pink from the lack of oxygen in her lungs, but she nodded and smiled. Tokoyami looked around at the other pupils and sighed at the volume. He made the decision to inform Pink Ninja that Recovery Girl had not yet shown up to assist people in need. She gave a nod and continued negotiating the masses to assist any pupils who were hurt. Tokoyami and Kirishima found her when Pink Ninja finished. "Hey guys, I'm D-Dash," she continued, waving at them, but she stopped there. Her cheeks reddened as she stumbled into the boy's arms. "Are you alright, San?" "Are you sure, Chan?" Kirishima said, giving the Pink Ninja a worried glance while nodding slightly. Tokoyami put his fingers to her forehead and said, "You are really hot. Is this an after effect of your quirk?" His eyes widened a little. With a weak smile, Pink Ninja looked up into both men's eyes and said, "Yeah." Her vision became a little fuzzy as exhaustion set in, and she had the impression that someone was carrying her. Before passing out, Pink Ninja tried to articulate her thoughts. "Sorry." She discovered she was back at her residence when she woke up. Pink Ninja grunted a little before sitting up to survey her surroundings. That test had worn her down, and she was starting to get a migraine, so she glanced at the note beside her before massaging her eyes. Pink Ninja took up the note and skimmed through it. "Hello, Horno-chan. My name is Kirishima. I simply wanted to write you a note to explain what happened since Tokoyami had to depart after the exam because he had to accomplish something important. I chose to repay my obligation, because debt isn't manly, and take you home after the recovery girl told me she couldn't help you since you were exhausted. I learned your residence from the school, and that's about all. I wish you a speedy recovery. In the future, I hope we'll be classmates." Smiley face. When the letter ended, Pink Ninja grinned and sighed because the two men made her think of her closest pals. After that, she got up and went about her day. A week later, her fate was decided when her score was mailed to her. Pink Ninja rubbed her hands anxiously together before turning to face her two buddies. In front of her sat Yi's letter, and she felt awful. Her face and hands started to get wet. In front of her, Naruto and a friend sat and encouraged the girl with the pink hair. "Don't worry about it, Pink Ninja-chan. I know you'll probably get in," Naruto exclaimed, grinning at the woman. Pink Ninja gave the two a weak smile, and his friend nodded and hummed in accord. As she weakly took up the letter and carefully opened it, a little projector was out from the envelope. Crossing her fingers, Pink Ninja placed it on the table. The pro-hero present mic stated, I am here to tell you some news, examinee. Listen up, Pink Ninja," as the projection started to turn on and everything was visible. Pink Ninja closed her eyes in terror and prayed as hard as she could. "You have been accepted into Yui. Recovery Girl thanks you for helping all the other students, but she says to be careful next time you use that quirk of yours. Anyhow, congratulations," she said. Pink Ninja's eyes widened at the exclamation, and tears started to form at the corners of her eyes. She looked at Naruto and her companion, who both grinned at her. The friend sneered at her while Naruto gave her the thumbs up. Pink Ninja choked. "I got in!" Pink Ninja sat down at her desk, which was in the last row and farthest from the window, and covered her face with both of her hands in shame. She sighed since she was the first person to come for class, and it appeared that nobody else was there. God, she was overly enthusiastic about something like the first day of school. In an attempt to kill boredom, Pink Ninja glanced around the room and saw that there were an odd number of students, with desks set up in 1 row of 5 and 4 rows of 4. Pink Ninja let out another sigh and started staring out the window. She decided that while she waited, it would be better to learn about medicine, so she took out her text and started immersing herself. The second student to come in was a blond male with spiky hair. He sat in his assigned seat, seemingly oblivious to her. He glanced at Pink Ninja, then brushed her off. Pink Ninja suggested that she might want to go introduce herself to him by biting her lip. She placed her text in her purse. Pink Ninja mustered the bravery to walk over to his desk and take a position in front of him. He gazed up at her with a bored expression on his face. "Hey, I thought I'd introduce myself. My name is Pink Ninja." She extended her hand for him to shake. He sneered at her, and then grimaced disparagingly. "I don't need to introduce myself to you, Strawberry," he murmured. "Strawberry." Pink Ninja's smile wavered as the man sneered at her before ignoring her once more. "Yeah, had an issue with that? Ah, hell no." Hissing at her like a vengeful cat, Spiky's response was hilarious as he grabbed his head and stood up. "Well, all right, good to meet you, Spiky." She made sure her pal understood that what he was doing was bad by smiling before karately chopping him in the head. "Hey, what the devil is wrong with you?" Pink Ninja smirked at him and crossed her arms, saying, "Nothing is wrong with me, Spiky," despite his furious grab of her wrist. "Don't call me Spiky, straw bitch," he shouted, his hand burning her wrist. "Well, don't call me Strawberry, Spiky," he said, making a grunt and scowling at her before releasing her wrist. She said, healing her arm with her quirk. Before Bakyu sat back down and ignored her, Pink Ninja smiled at him. "Bakyu Katsuki," he said. "It's good to meet you, Bakyu-kun." She looked up and saw a tall man with numerous limbs attached to his arms. She smiled warmly at him, and he nodded awkwardly. Pink Ninja approached him to ask if she could introduce herself, saying, "Hi. My name is Pink Ninja," she said, extending her hand for a handshake. After he shook her hand, Pink Ninja remarked, "Shiji Mezu, nice to meet you," and smiled at him before trying to strike up a conversation, but she couldn't see his face clearly. Tokoimi then came in, forcing Pink Ninja to leave Shuji and go over to the Birdman. "Tokoimi-kun, good morning." "Morning, San." While they were talking, Pink Ninja noticed that the teacher would be arriving any moment, so she bid farewell and sat down once again. Examinee 7111, subsequently identified as Ida Tenya, started shouting at Bakyu, creating a commotion. The door opened to reveal the boisterous green-haired boy, who identified himself as Midoriya Izuku. Pink Ninja, not finding any of the conversation interesting, started reciting the body's pressure points. Curiously, the Pink Ninja obeyed the directions of a strolling mummy wearing a yellow sleeping bag. "I'm your homeroom teacher, I was Shoyuta, pleasure meeting you," she said, not sure whether he was actually their teacher. It took you lot 8 seconds to quiet down. Life is short, kids, you're all lacking in common sense," the instructor, or at least what Pink Ninja thought, stated. He pulled his exercise attire from his sleeping bag and declared, "Wear these, immediately, and then shove off to the PE grounds." Pink Ninja wondered why they started working out first as she studied the uniforms. Iwa-sensei stated that they were outside for a quirk apprehension test while Pink Ninja waited outside, staring at her homeroom instructor, who had long black hair and these bandage-like things wrapped around his neck. His eyes seemed dry. Pink Ninja sighed as the surprise test brought back memories of her earlier martial arts instruction with 6th Head Master, which caused a disturbance in the classroom. How about the ritual? And the meeting with the guidance counselor? The girl who had introduced herself to Midoriya at the beginning of homeroom. Iwa-sensei continued. You all understand the school's reputation for freedom on campus. Well, that freedom goes for us senseis too. And the class as a whole appeared confused. If you want to be heroes, we don't have time for frilly niceties, the girl replied, unable to express her surprise. Softball pitch, standing long jump, 50-meter dash, endurance running, grip strength test, sustained sideways jumps, upper body exercises, seated toe touch, these are all activities you know from middle school. Naturally, physical tests where you were barred from using your quirks. The country still hasn't gotten around to standardizing those sorts of records or keeping track of average performance levels. Well, that's negligence on the part of MEXD. In middle school, how far could you throw a softball, Bakyu? He turned to the spiky and asked. 67 meters. Iwa-sensei tossed a softball in the male's direction as he got closer to the throwing area. Try using your quirk this time around. As long as you don't exit the circle, anything you do is fine, don't hold back, she stated. The majority of the students were shocked to hear Bakyu exclaim, "Die" during his toss, but he said, "You got it," with a serious expression on his face. Iwa-sensei broke the stillness by declaring, "Before anything else, one must know what they're capable of. This is a rational metric that will form the basis of your hero foundation. Bakyu had thrown the ball 705, 2 meters, according to the device he held up. 705 meters? Amazing! Now we can truly utilize our peculiarities. For you, it is the Department of Heroics. You say it seems like fun? So you were planning to spend your 3 years here having a good old time? Iwa-sensei answered in front of a sullen face. How did we end up as heroes? Okay, so here's the new rule. The student with the lowest overall score will be deemed useless and immediately expelled. Our freedom allows us to eliminate pupils as we see fit. This is the Department of Heroics. Welcome! Pink Ninja's brows furrowed. She was determined not to be kicked out of this class for being deemed unworthy. When the girl raised her voice again to protest that the ranking was nonsensical, the teacher retorted that this was done to prepare them for the next challenge. This is plus ultra. I expect you to overcome these trials and climb to the top. The first trial is the 50-meter dash. A huge gust of wind blew by Pink Ninja as she watched Ida use his quirk, having motors in his calves, to achieve a respectable time. 3.04 seconds. The robot cried out. 5:58 seconds. The class had an odd number of students, so Pink Ninja moaned that she would be running alone when a girl with a frog-like trait crossed the 50-meter mark. The next 2 students were a male and a female, one of whom had a tail, and the girl who had spoken out first. Pink Ninja watched as everyone else lined up in pairs, ready to run. 7:15 seconds. The next 2 were the extraterrestrial girl and the sparkly guy. Pink Ninja was shocked to see the guy use a laser from his belly button to fly over the course. 5.51 seconds. The Pink Ninja stared at the next person in line, Bakyu and Midoriya, who seemed ready to kill. He used his exploding quirk as a time saver. The Pink Ninja looked at the guy incredulously as he explained why he couldn't hold the laser. 4:13 seconds. The robot exclaimed when Midoriya was done. 7:02 seconds after that, Iwa nodded and turned to face Pink Ninja. She groaned and walked up to the starting line, where she saw that Tokoyami and Kirishima were watching at her. Pink Ninja waited for the whistle to indicate that it was time for her to start running. Pink Ninja employed her quirk to try to strengthen her legs, running as hard as she could until the robot gave her the time. 6:57 seconds. Although her time was only slightly better than her prior score, Pink Ninja groaned a little in relief that it was not one of the lowest ones. Trial 2, the Grip Strength Test. After getting her score of 89 kgW, Pink Ninja sighed, thankful that she had lifted a lot of weights and that her friends had pushed her to lift more. She had strengthened her arm for the exam, much like her legs, and she glanced at the other students to see if hers was among the lower ones. She saw that Shuji had been given 540 kgW. 540 pounds? Are you a gorilla or something? No, you resemble an octopus more. She overheard the conversation regarding the number. Who said octopus? Hot. Needless to say, Pink Ninja decided to end the conversation. Trial 3, the Standing Long Jump. The others were all farther away than her. Baki used his explosions again, the sparkly one used his laser again, and Pink Ninja, who had been lucky on the 50-meter dash, used her quirk again and launched herself across the sand, landing farther than her previous record and smiling. Pink Ninja glanced at Midoriya and noticed that he was not getting high scores, so he landed in the sand. Midoriya thanked him and ran out, but Kirishima came up behind her to talk to her, and she soon forgot about the child. The Pink Ninja seemed confused as he used her hand and swiftly stood up as she approached him and gave him her hand. Test 4, Continuous Sideways Leaps. Pink Ninja, who obviously got the same score in middle school, was less fortunate on this test, sighing as she looked at the smallest student in the class. Trial 5's Pitch. Pink Ninja received the highest score in the class, Infinity, when she choked on her own saliva after the talkative girl threw her ball. The girl grinned at Pink Ninja when Pink Ninja walked on her next, murmuring, "Good luck," to her, which made Pink Ninja smile back. When she grabbed a ball, she looked first at the teacher and then at the other students. Tokoimi nodded and Kirishima gave her a supportive smile. She sighed and prepared her arm, and by using her quirk, she was able to get it to land 130 meters farther than she was used to. Pink Ninja released the breath she was holding and turned to face the next student. Midoriya seemed nervous as he prepared to toss his ball, and Pink Ninja's whispered encouragement caused him to look upset. When she arrived at the group, she heard another conversation. It seems like Midoriya isn't doing well. Obviously not. He's a fucking guppy with no quirk. Quirkless? You saw what he did on the entrance exam, didn't you? When Kirishima came up to her and remarked, "Yo, what did you say to Midoriya?" he laughed loudly. He seemed more anxious than before. When Midoriya threw the softball, it landed quite close to what Pink Ninja had expected, and Midoriya looked confused. "Just some encouragement, he seemed like he needed it," Pink Ninja remarked smilingly. Kirishima nodded and then became silent. "How did someone like you get into this academy? It defies logic. I removed your peculiarity." The Pink Ninja could hear Midoriya whispering to himself, but Iwa cut him off. "You erased it?" screamed Midoriya. "And those Google goggles, oh my god!" Eraserhead is the erasing hero. Since she had never heard of the well-known hero, the Pink Ninja was confused, and she could hear other students in the class feeling the same way. "Who is the eraser? I had never heard of him. The name is new to me. He truly is an underground hero. Whatever hopes you have nursed of your imminent rescue, as you can see, nobody is in a position to come to your aid," Midoriya said, interrupting the teacher. Iwa continued, "From what I observed, you can't rein in your quirk's full power, meaning you can't use it efficiently at all. Did you believe someone would come to save you after you crippled yourself again?" When Pink Ninja noticed that the two were still talking, she turned to see Kirishima talking to another round-elbowed boy and walked over to stand next to Tokoimi, who greeted her. "Tokoimi-kun, how are you feeling?" the Pink Ninja smiled and asked. "Fine, just a little tired." "Are you experiencing a headache?" I'll dispose of it for you. Tokoyami glanced at her, then gave her a small nod and added, If you could, that would be much appreciated. Nobody in the class was expecting anything spectacular when he brought his hand back, so everyone was shocked when Midoriya threw it 7.053 meters. Midoriya said something to Aiwa that Pink Ninja was unable to catch, but she could see that it pleased Aiwa. She looked curiously at his hand and noticed that his finger had a purplish hue. You now have a record worthy of a hero! The Infinity Girl cried out. Pink Ninja laughed a little when the glittery boy said it wasn't stylish enough. Your finger's swollen, reminds me of the entrance exam incident, what an odd quirk. Ida continued. When Aiwa's claw stopped Bakyu from using his quirk to attack Midoriya, Pink Ninja jumped back in shock. Bakyu's mouth was hanging open, and Pink Ninja could hear him screaming. Shit's this cloth! I can't! It's my unique capturing weapon, a carbon nanofiber woven steel wire alloy. Geez, stop forcing me to use my quirk so much. Damn it, I have dry eyes. We're wasting time, prepare for the next trial, he remarked, releasing Bakyu after starting to chastise him. Bakyu stood still as Midoriya walked into the group. The Infinity Girl came over and asked how he was, and Pink Ninja suddenly showed up too. He gave her a scared expression, but she just smiled at him. I can heal you if you want, Pink Ninja stated in a voice that rang. Midoriya felt uneasy when Pink Ninja gently put his hand in hers. Aiwa watched without saying anything, and her hands glowed green for a few minutes before stopping when Pink Ninja released his hand. Her hand no longer had that pupilish hue, which made her feel better. Most of the class was astounded by her healing abilities. Midoriya stammered, flushed by Pink Ninja's touch. Thank you very much. As Kirishima put his arm around her neck, she smiled. He chuckled, saying, Man, I'm constantly surprised by your peculiarity, Chan. After Pink Ninja laughed and said, You shouldn't be that surprised. The class moved on to the next try, but not before praising Pink Ninja, which made the girl blush a little. Trial 6, Endurance Running. Pink Ninja performed better than the majority of her classmates because she could utilize her quirk to change her blood cells to absorb more oxygen. Exercises for the upper body in Trial 7. Throughout this trial, Pink Ninja was among the worst in her class. She despised everything in life and felt a little sick from working out so hard after treating Midoriya. Trial 8. Touching your toes while seated. He encouraged Pink Ninja to be more flexible than anyone else so that she would have more advantages in a combat fight. When she reached the end of the board to perform the toe touch, Aiwa nodded at her before going on to the other students. Sixth Headmaster, thank you. Pink Ninja surprised all of her classmates by passing this trial with ease. Kirishima pouted as Tokoyami nodded and walked up behind him. How can you be that flexible, Chan? I just made it to the board's edge. I could barely reach that also. She chuckled and remarked, It's not that hard for me, I'm pretty flexible. How flexible are you? Inquired an invisible girl who had just completed her test. Sensing that everyone was watching her, Pink Ninja felt comfortable enough to stand on her hands and do a handstand before putting her feet forward in a side split. When she was done, she did a handstand before putting her feet on the ground. Pink Ninja surprised everyone by smiling before performing the middle splits. The invisible girl was so impressed by Pink Ninja that she showered her with accolades, which made her feel ashamed. I'm Hagakure Toru, declared the unseen girl. Call me Toru, please. The two girls clicked immediately once Pink Ninja introduced herself, and they started talking about everything. Man, that body is super flexible, and it would be fun to play with, Mineta Minoru remarked with a smile as she watched Pink Ninja show off her flexibility while Toru grouped her and introduced her to all the other girls. A large gathering of people, mostly guys, crowded around to watch. Kirishima exclaimed at Minata's comment, causing Pink Ninja to glance around the group and rush to the teacher to find out their ranking. The other males blushed at Minata's comment and turned their heads away from Pink Ninja, feeling uneasy as they glanced at her. As Iwa-sensei prepared to announce the results, tensions among the students grew. "It's time to present the results," she said. "Oh yeah, that whole expulsion thing was a lie," she added. "The total is simply the aggregate sum of each of your scores. If I recited all your scores, it would take 1,000,000 years, so I'll disclose them all at once," she said. When Pink Ninja said, "It was a logical ruse to pull out your best performances," everyone's eyes widened, but one girl, who Pink Ninja later found out was named Yayoro Zumomo, did not appear surprised. "Guys, come on, think! It was a hoax, of course." Pink Ninja smiled when the results were revealed. Since she wasn't the last student on the list, she checked her name and discovered that it was 7th in the class. Pink Ninja observed a variety of expressions on the faces of the other students. When Pink Ninja got to the classroom before the end of the day, she waited next to Tokoemi's desk and smiled at him as he approached. "Do you still have a headache?" inquired Pink Ninja. The majority of her classmates returned to observe the two in a couple's position after he nodded and approached her. Pink Ninja smiled and glanced at the others before Toru came up behind her. She raised her hands to touch his head and started to ease the pain after noticing the calm demeanor he was giving her and the softness of his feathers. "Whoa, I didn't know you guys were dating," Toru remarked. After laughing, Pink Ninja released Tokoemi. "Nah, I don't think Tokoemi-kun would date someone like me," Pink Ninja said, removing her items from her desk before turning back to Tokoemi, who thanked her and gathered with other guys to talk. "By the way, Pink Ninja-chan, what is your quirk?" Toru asked, in an effort to identify what it was. "Well, it's called surgeon. Basically, I can manipulate cells to do whatever I want. It's not as easy as it seems, though." Pink Ninja chuckled and went on. "I have to study a lot to make this quirk actually work." Toru shrugged her shoulder and continued to leave the classroom, but Pink Ninja could tell she was surprised because most of the kids were listening to her talk about her oddity, although she couldn't read her mind exactly. "Well, I got to go. Goodbye, Toru-chan." The Pink Ninja waved to her before exiting the classroom. On the way, she noticed Kirishima trying to talk to Bakyu, but it seemed to be a one-sided conversation. Kirishima turned to the road after smiling and waving at Pink Ninja. The next day, Yui's classes were pretty normal. They had regular lessons for required subjects before noon, and at noon we could eat in the cafeteria or wherever we wanted. Most of the food was prepared by the culinary hero, Lunch Rush, who created excellent cuisine. No one was raising their hands to respond to their current teacher, Present Mike. The essential studies on heroism, however, began after that, and Pink Ninja was shocked to hear a famous hero yell in the hallway. "It's me!" All Might entered through the entrance as everyone turned to face it. Like a normal person, they uttered those words. As everyone was celebrating his arrival, he marched into the classroom and proceeded to describe the next horror they would all have to go through. All of the cases with the costumes inside were displayed as the walls started to move out. "Foundational Hero Studies. We'll be using a variety of trials to strengthen your hero foundation in this lesson. Let's get started on this immediately." "The challenge of battle," All Might said, holding up a card with the word "battle" on it. "And to go with your first battle, we've prepared the gear we had you send in request for to fit your peculiarities." As she moved to get her number, Pink Ninja remembered the moment she thought about her hero costume. She was spending time with Naruto and her friend because they too had to design their hero costumes, and the Pink Ninja looked nervous when a blank piece of paper was placed in front of her. She had not yet thought of any ideas for her hero outfit, and when Naruto's friend offered her a drink, she jolted out of her reverie and muttered a brief "Thank you." Naruto said as he was drawing out his outfit. Pink Ninja-chan, have you come up with any ideas yet? His friend was equally aware of his desires and did not struggle to get them. No. Pink Ninja frowned, and Nerda looked up from his work with a smile. Nerda's friend suggested, "Why don't you just design it using the knowledge of our fights?" Without looking at his paper. "You ought to be aware of your limitations." She nodded slowly and said, "Well, let's see. I know that wearing loose clothing will be a disadvantage in a fight, so something tight and less restrictive would be best. With that, I think if I had a full body one, there would be less skin to show and maybe less damage I might have to deal with in the future." She briefly considered wearing gloves, but decided against it. "It would be ideal since it would shield my knuckles while still enabling me to use my quirk." While his friend disregarded both of them, Nerdu kept nodding, saying, "Oh, and remember the battle I had with that one man who had that quirk? The one capable of producing toxic gas? I also think I should have secret compartments in my suit to store medicine or something. Maybe a belt instead because it would be easy to reach for equipment in case of emergencies." Pink Ninja remarked, "Maybe I should have some sort of full-face mask for my mask, to filter out air and make sure nothing gets in my eyes." "How are your shoes doing? Do you recall all the times you slipped due to poor footing?" Nerda questioned. "What if I had placed grips at the bottom of my shoe?" Pink Ninja asked, opening her eyes. She had forgotten that aspect. "And just in case, I could insert a dagger-like object into the heel of my high-heeled shoes," she told herself. Pink Ninja nodded as she began making her hero costume, which was intended to be as stable and agile in combat as Nerda's and her companions. She collected her thoughts before heading to the changing room to put on her new superhero attire. Her hero costume was a tight, dark red body, covered in tiny pockets, and she noticed that her boots matched the color of her suit. Pink Ninja thought she chose this color because it would leave fewer stains if she ever had to deal with blood. She looked at herself in the mirror and smiled a little. Pink Ninja also wore a pack around her leg to keep a small weapon, but she hadn't purchased anything like that yet, so she glanced at the belt that hung around her hips and the compartments that held medicine. Her arms were adorned with long, fitted, fingerless gloves that contrasted with the black of her costume suit. To finish the ensemble, she pulled on her lab coat, which was more decorative than functional and had a black circle on the back that symbolized her family. Due to visibility, Pink Ninja wore a white cloth mask that covered her neck and the bottom of her face. The mask was a tribute to her other sensei, Sixth Headmaster, and was able to filter out air. Pink Ninja stitched a red dog mouth into the mask to make it look as dog-like as possible. She pulled the mask up to cover her face because she had to get to work right away. "Let's see what you're made of, you embryos!" All Might yelled as students began to emerge from the tunnel toward the combat grounds. "The trial battle is about to begin." Pink Ninja looked closely at the hero costumes worn by every other student. She smiled at Toru and pounced on Pink Ninja for a hug after hearing a squeal behind her and turning around to see gloves floating in midair. "You look adorable, Pink Ninja-chan!" Toru cried. Others who were curious about what was happening were drawn to her shriek, and Pink Ninja laughed and hugged her back. "You appear to be invisible, so I assume you also look fantastic." Tsuyu then came up to the two of them. Toru and Pink Ninja complimented the shorter girl, and Tsuyu flushed a little before saying, "Thank you." They became silent as All Might introduced them to their job. Pink Ninja smiled at Toru, who returned the grin and met Baku's eyes. Baku frowned at her. "This fight trial will take place indoors." In this hero-saturated society, most acts of villainy are committed indoors, including imprisonment, house arrest, and the black market. Why, any villain with intelligence is lurking in the shadows. All Might grinned. Villain cleanup is typically seen out in the open, but statistically the better part of it is an indoor job. You will divide into villain and hero groups for a 2-on-2 team fight during this test. The pink ninja seemed confused, because there were only 21 students, right? Does it mean the student will feel something without a partner? How about the basic instruction? Tsuyu asked. This is foundational training, said All Might, clenching his fist. There won't be any robots this time, therefore it's acceptable to just destroy. Before they all started talking at once, he continued to smile at each pupil. How do we decide who wins and who loses then? Is blowing them away acceptable? Is expulsion a possibility, similar to Iwa-sensei's exercise? What would be the most effective strategy to divide us into various groups? Don't I look amazing in this cape? We'll have villains guarding a nuclear bomb they plan to use during this training. Before it's too late, the heroes must foil them and their evil plan. The heroes win if they catch the villains or make it to the nuclear core before the timer goes off, while the villains win if they capture the heroes or hold onto the core the entire time. Instead of responding to the questions right away, All Might read from a piece of paper. Pink Ninja heard the final question and bit her lip to keep from laughing. A lottery will be used to select your teammates. As he grabbed a box from behind him, he said. Ida remarked, looking shocked. Is that truly how we'll do it? Well, professionals are frequently forced to form impromptu team-ups with other heroes they might not know very well, so this is probably testing that. Pink Ninja responded to Midoriya's remark. Ida apologized before All Might decided to start the trial, and everyone started drawing their letters to identify which team they were on. When Pink Ninja pulled out her letter K, she was surprised to see that nobody else had it, and she sighed when she realized that she would be the only student without a partner. All Might Sensei, huh? What should I do because it appears that I am linked up with no one? She went up to All Might and inquired what she would do. You selected the one-man squad, so I get to choose what you will perform. Because of your healing quirk, you will be able to assist the others in the event that they are injured in combat, said Pink Ninja, as she tilted her head in confusion as All Might began to laugh, causing everyone to stare at him. It is all right, Chan. You will be our nurse for today's round, so don't worry. As All Might started to speak to the teams, the entire class seemed to stand next to their partner, saying, All right. Therefore, please report any injuries you may have had to our tiny nurse, Chan. After the battle, Pink Ninja pouted unintentionally, sighed, nodded, and turned to face the others. She wanted to take part in the battle drill. The group felt a variety of feelings as Pink Ninja blushed at the attention and offered them all a weak smile as everyone's gaze landed on her. The teams were as follows. Team A, Uraraka Ochako and Midoriya Izuku. Team B, Shuji Mezu and Todoroki Shudo. Team C, Mineta Minoru and Yayoro Zumomo. Team D, Baku Katsuki and Ida Tenya. Team E, Ishido Mina and Yuga Oyama. Team F, Kudakuji and Sato Rikida. Team G, Kaminari Denki and Jirakyuka. Team H, Tokoyami Fumikage and Azuri Tsuyu. Team I, Ojiro Mashireo and Hagakure Turu. Team J, Siro Hanta and Kirishima Aijuru. Team K, the Pink Ninja, sometimes called Nurse. And the first two pairs to engage in combat will be the following. All Might cried. There will be heroes in pair A and villains in pair D. This scenario has the villains inside the building first. All Might said as they headed to another building, holding up two separate balls. 5 minutes later, the heroes will also be allowed entry. The surveillance cameras will allow everyone else to see what happens. Baku and young Ida will be able to enter the minds of villains thanks to this. This is a real-world training exercise. Go all out without worrying about getting hurt. However, if things go out of control, we'll stop it short, of course. Everyone nodded and left the basement as both teams finished their work. When she bumped into someone's back while rubbing her sore nose, they turned around, and Pink Ninja's eyes met Heterochromia's. Pink Ninja saw that he had two eyes, one blue and one brown, and that his hair was split in the middle, with red on the left and white on the right. He gave her a blank expression and Pink Ninja started, but stopped when she didn't know his name. I'm sorry, Todoroki Shudo. I'm sorry, Todoroki-kun, for bumping into you, Pink Ninja stated with a slight smile before bowing when she noticed Todoroki's partner looking at them and then circled Todoroki to find a good spot to see the monitor. Now watch and make your own plans, All Might cried as Midoriya and Ochako stepped into the building. Pink Ninja could see that they were using Ochako's gravity quirk to enter the building through a window that was not on the ground floor. Pink Ninja watched them turn a corner until Baku surprised them by flying at them. Midoriya and Ochako avoided being hit, but they were not unharmed. Half of Midoriya's mask was destroyed, indicating that the students could hear what was being said but realized this was not a typical fight. The two were still fighting on TV when Kirishima said, "That Baku is a cheater. It's very unmanly to ambush." Pink Ninja watched the TV anxiously, fearing that Baku would seriously injure one of them. Ambushes are a smart tactic. After all, they are engaged in fierce combat, All Might answered. Midori actually ducked away from it pretty well, a pink-skinned woman remarked. The Pink Ninja's eyes widened at the violent move, and when Baku sprang at Midoriya, everyone was startled to see that he was on his back. Kirishima asked before turning to face Pink Ninja. "What is he saying?" Kirishima could see she was getting nervous because she started to wriggle. There's no sound through the surveillance footage, but no one could comprehend the shouts. Wired transceivers allow teammates to communicate. Additionally, each of them has a crude drawing of the structure. And this capture tape. The second someone wraps this around their opponent, that's the sign they're captured, All Might said after demonstrating a white tape roll. The heroes are unaware of the precise location of the core, and there is a 15-minute time limit, correct? The hero's side is at a pretty heavy disadvantage in this scenario, All Might remarked as the girl with the pink complexion started to speak. You children, did Iwa not tell you our motto? Now say it with me, All Might chuckled as he spoke. After everyone shouted, "Plus you dash," until the teacher saw the dazzling boy, the fight between the two guys continued and got worse over time, and Baku didn't seem to know when to give up, so Pink Ninja started fiddling with her coat. "Damn, that kid's pissed!" she heard another student exclaim. "It's frightening." The focus shifted when Ochako appeared to have found the bomb, and Pink Ninja saw that she was laughing because of something Ida had done. They seemed to be pointing out something in the room and conversing, but Pink Ninja noticed that the room was empty. To offset Ochako's peculiarity regarding gravity, Pink Ninja went to the screen with Baku and Midoriya when she saw a huge explosion from above. A huge boom shattered the building, and once the dust cleared, a huge hole emerged in the side of the building. "This is supposed to be a lesson," Kirishima said, glancing at the TV. "Midoriya." When Pink Ninja realized he was alright but still had to confront Baku, her expression was filled with relief and agony. She started to fidget more, wanting to help Midoriya, but she appeared anxious until Kirishima came over and held her shoulder. Pink Ninja looked up at him, and he grinned at her. "Don't worry about that," Kirishima remarked. "A nurse shouldn't frown, right?" Pink Ninja giggled a little before grinning feebly. "You're right, Kirishima-kun," the Pink Ninja responded with a smile. Like their other buddies, Ochako leaped up and made herself float toward the bomb, but Ida ran to it and moved it before she could touch it, and they started staring at each other. "Sensei, please stop this!" Kirishima uttered. "He will murder him at this pace. That Baku kid is insane." Before giving his order, All Might silently objects, saying, It defeats the purpose of defending your stronghold to launch an attack with such a wide damage radius indoors. Whether you're a villain or a hero, that was plain stupid. You'll get a ton of demerits if you do it again. Bakyu yelled on the screen before attacking Midoriya again, hitting him when he went behind him. He deliberately misled his opponent and used his explosion ability to redirect his midair trajectory to his advantage. You wouldn't think him the clever type looking at him, but those were some subtle motor skills, Tadakori added. Landing a telling blow while resisting inertia at the same time means he must be able to adjust his explosion power very finely, Momo stated. A blonde man who had also started talking added, I can't say I like him, but if the kid's got talent, the kid's got talent. Bakyu kept beating Midoriya without pausing, and the pink ninja decided that was sufficient and shouted, Sensei! This is more than enough, so please stop. When Bakyu and Midoriya started running at each other, All Might grabbed the microphone and began to speak, but he stopped in the middle of his sentence. Other people also spoke, but All Might ignored them since he was too focused on the actual fight. Instead of hitting Bakyu, Midoriya threw his fist aloft, making a big hole in the roof, and debris flew everywhere, making Pink Ninja understand why. Using all the debris as a distraction for Ida, Ochako glided toward the explosion. The Hero Squad triumphs! Without waiting for permission, Pink Ninja rushed to where she thought Midoriya lay, ignoring Kirishima's cries in order to assist someone in need. Across the room, she noticed Bakyu looking astonished. Pink Ninja ran over to Midoriya and knelt down. When her hand started to glow, she looked for what was wrong and discovered that he had numerous scratches, broken bones, and burns all over his body. She nodded to herself and started by fixing the broken bones because failing to do so would cause his hand to warp in the future. After fixing most of the bones, she moved on to the burns, but before she could finish healing them, All Might put a hand on her head, so Pink Ninja looked up to see what he needed. For now, see how the others are doing. Leave the rest to Recovery Girl, Horno-chan. All Might shouted with a wide smile. After biting her lip and nodding slowly, Pink Ninja stood up and looked down at the bots that started to carry him away. She then went to the monitor room and waited for everyone to arrive. Ochako was the first to arrive, and Pink Ninja smiled and walked up to her saying, Hey Ochako-chan, can I do anything for you? Well, is there anything you can do to help me feel less dizzy? Pink Ninja nodded and placed her palm on her head as she spoke, flushing a little. Ochako grinned affectionately at Pink Ninja and sighed with pleasure as the sensation faded. Is there anything more that requires attention? Nope, thank you very much, Pink Ninja-chan, Ochako remarked. Her cheeks flushed. I hope you don't mind me calling you that, she said. No problem, Uraraka-chan, the Pink Ninja said with a smile as she turned to meet Ida, who had just entered the room. Are you hurt at all, Ida-kun? She said, causing him to stiffen. She inquired. No, I'm fine, Ida replied. Well, maybe my head feels a little in pain. The rocks collided with my head pretty hard, he said, feeling uncomfortable that Pink Ninja could tell he was lying. Thank you for your concern, he murmured, but Pink Ninja just stared at him. Pink Ninja smiled and finally turned to Bakyu, the last person to arrive. Ida blushed at the touch but soon relaxed from the experience, muttering a quick, thank you, and moving to stand next to Ochako. Pink Ninja moaned as she walked up to him and inquired, Bakyu-kun, how are you feeling? Pink Ninja tried to talk to him again, but he ignored her and kept staring down, so she scowled and decided that enough was enough. The room echoed with a thunderous slap, and everyone turned to see what had occurred. Bakyu Katsuki, I am asking you a question and you better answer me, damn it, he said, staring into her eyes while holding both of Pink Ninja's hands on his cheeks. He turned his head away from her eyes and Pink Ninja began to growl at him, saying, Bakyu, you are a jerk. Anger reddened his face. What was that straw bitch? Shouted Bakyu. Bakyu was shocked, and a red tint reached his ears, but the majority of his face was already red. As he momentarily forgot his defeat, emotion flooded his eyes once more, allowing Pink Ninja to smile in relief. Is there any pain? The Pink Ninja freed his face and placed her hands by her sides before asking, humming and smiling. Bakyu stumbled a little, perplexed by Pink Ninja's abrupt change in demeanor, and then muttered what was wrong. She then walked around him, mending his back, which was simply bruised. Pink Ninja was indifferent when Bakyu swiftly broke free from her grasp without thanking her for her help. Young Ida was the best in this match, in my opinion. As All Might went over the training practice, Ida was taken aback and started to make noises. However, weren't Ochako and Midoriya the winners? Looking confused, Suyu asked. I'm curious as to why I may think that. Who knows why? Then Momo raised her hand. Yes, All Might Sensei, it's because Ida was the one who adapted the most to the situation. Having watched the fight, Bakyu's behavior was clearly driven by some personal grudge, and thus totally arbitrary. Furthermore, just as you told us earlier, Sensei, a large range attack in an indoor arena is just idiotic. The same reasoning goes for Midoriya. Uraraka's game got loose halfway through and her final attack was too reckless. We were treating that papier-mâché thing as an actual nuclear weapon, so that kind of attack wouldn't have flown. Momo took a deep breath. Ida devised a counter-strategy against an opponent because he correctly supposed the match would revolve around the core. While he was too slow in reacting that last attack, I believe the hero team's so-called victory is being too nice, calling this just training, and that get dangerously close to skirting the spirit of the rules. Well, young Ida may have been a little too formal as well, but that was the right response. Everything shuddered. We should always begin our studies with familiar material, and we'll never be top heroes if we don't support one another completely, Momo exclaimed. Kirishima must have noticed because he bumped into her, and Pink Ninja turned to face him, and he made a stupid gesture to try to cheer up the young woman, but she ignored it, looking anxiously at the door, her mind still a little jumbled from thinking about Midoriya. Pink Ninja laughed softly and then grinned at the young man, and Kirishima smiled before he turned back to the TV. Glancing around, she saw that Bakyu was numb and emotionless, so she walked up to him quietly and nudged him. When Bakyu looked up once more, Pink Ninja grinned and said, I'm here if you need me. He stared at her without saying anything, so she used her quirk to send him warmth in the hopes that it would show what she meant. Pink Ninja went back to check the screen and saw that everything was finished, so she approached the hero team as everyone started to enter the monitor room. Are there any wounds? Shuji shook his head no as Todoroki replied. We did not have any injuries, thank you. And Pink Ninja smiled before approaching the villain squad, who seemed a little let down by the defeat. Remain positive, Tura-chan. There will always be another opportunity. Pink Ninja noticed her pout on the floor and responded. I guess so. My feet are a little frostbitten, could you maybe? Pink Ninja said. No problem, as she quickly recovered from the damage. How about you? Ojiro Mashireo, said the male with the tail. Thank you though, I don't have any injuries. During this method, she eventually learned everyone's names, and it continued in this manner for the rest of the fights. However, she had some trouble persuading some of her classmates to cooperate. Kirishima. You don't want to be healed? What do you mean? I'll have scars that are macho. If you want to be manly, I don't care. Damn it, let me heal you. No. After the fights, everyone went to change out of their costumes and go home for the night. Pink Ninja was gathering her things in the classroom when she noticed Tokoemi sitting at a desk talking to Denki, the lightning quirk guy, and she went over to them. Hey Tokoemi-kun, Denki-kun. Hello, Horno. Hello, Chan. After they exchanged a few words, Ochako joined in on the group's impromptu conversation, and Pink Ninja laughed a little, glancing at Tokoemi, who seemed to agree with her. Are you up for hanging out today after school? He glanced over and inquired. After a long period of silence, he turned his head in embarrassment, but Pink Ninja grinned and said, Sure, what brought this up? She didn't think he was sincere about wanting to hang out. Tokoemi whispered, You speak English very well, don't you? She noticed that he was upset and smiled charmingly at him. I need a little help with the homework. English is not my strong point. There is no issue, Tokoemi-kun. Do you want to meet at your house, mine, or somewhere else? If it is acceptable, your place. Tokoemi murmured the last words, but Pink Ninja couldn't understand him. He said something about how dark his house was. As she watched Ochako leave her hanging and saw that Midoriya had returned to the classroom, she couldn't help but laugh into Denki's hand. Pink Ninja hummed, and she could hear the other two talking. Pink Ninja came over and said, Wait for me, Tokoemi-kun, before he could leave. Hey Midoriya, how are your injuries? I'm just going to have a quick look at you. Before long, he left when Midoriya blushed slightly and remarked, Thank you, I'm all right. Despite her ignorance, Pink Ninja grinned and went back to Tokoemi. Are you ready? Following the Pink Ninja as she hummed gently on the way to her house, Tokoemi glanced at him and smiled a little. He reminded her of her calm and collected Naruto companion. So how was your day, Tokoemi-kun? Pink Ninja asked in an effort to start a discussion. It has gone well. How about you? I've been doing well. Just to warn you, my room is a bit of a forest, Pink Ninja stated, laughing at herself. A forest? You mean it's unclean? Tokoemi looked at Pink Ninja and inquired. When he said, Nope, not that kind of forest anyway, the Pink Ninja grinned. They arrived at Pink Ninja's house a few minutes later, and aside from the flowers and shrubs that grew around the grounds, it looked pretty much like every other house on the block. Pink Ninja unlocked the door to the vacant house and kicked off her shoes. My parents usually come home late, so don't worry if it seems kind of quiet. Make yourself at home. Pink Ninja called out to him as she led him into the kitchen, wrote a little note informing him that she had someone over, and set it on the table. Tokoemi's eyes were momentarily blinded by the brightness of the room as Pink Ninja climbed the stairs to her room and opened the door, but as soon as he focused again, he understood why Pink Ninja had described it as somewhat of a forest. Plants, including cacti, flowers, and other plants he had never heard of, were strewn along the walls, some hanging throughout the room, and others sitting on the floor. The room smelled very earthy, and there was a small sitting table in the center where they could finish their homework. Sitting quietly at the table, Tokoemi remarked, You were right, it is a forest in here. A little aloe vera plant was placed in the center. Well, I enjoy gathering plants with therapeutic qualities because it helps to be ready. In addition, one of my friends owns a plant store, and she has two amazing quirks. One is a family trait that has been passed down through the generations, and the other helps her grow all these plants. I apologize for that, Pink Ninja remarked, blushing after realizing how impolite she was. With a small smile, Tokoemi responded, No, it's okay. I enjoy listening to stuff like this. Pink Ninja also smiled. All right, let's get started on that English assignment. I hope that helped. I don't know if I explained it that well, Pink Ninja stated to Tokoemi when they were talking outside her house. Their conversation had just concluded when Tokoemi was called home. After nodding, he added, I learned a lot, thank you. And Tokoemi followed Pink Ninja to her gate. With a wave and a smile, Pink Ninja said, Well, Jami-kun, I'll see you tomorrow. Tokoemi whispered softly, Good night, Pink Ninja-san. And Pink Ninja returned home, remembering the few hours that had passed. Call me Pink Ninja. It makes me feel weird when my friends call me. I don't know. I'll call you Yami-kun if it will help you feel better. Why? Yami-kun? Yes, don't you think it's kind of cool? Pink Ninja smiled to herself and decided that tomorrow would be a good day before starting to make dinner for her family. Pink Ninja was startled to see a crowd of people congregating in front of the school. They all seemed to be reporters of some kind, and when she got close, they surrounded her, which made her uneasy. What can you tell me about All Might, about his teaching style? Asked one of the reporters as a microphone was thrust in her face. As she pushed her way through the crowd to the school's door, Pink Ninja said, he is a very good teacher, very smart in the ways of heroics, excuse me. Placing a hand on her chest because she was uncomfortable speaking in front of others and wasn't used to this kind of attention. Just as everyone in the classroom was talking about the reporters, Pink Ninja came in, moaned, and sat down, and Iwa-sensei came in to speak to the class. Placing a stack of papers on the platform, he remarked, I hope you're rested from yesterday's battle trial. I took the liberty of looking at your marks and evaluation. Iwa shouted, Bakyu, stop acting like a 7-year-old, you're squandering your own potential. Before Bakyu started talking to Midoriya, he mumbled something she couldn't hear. And you, are you constantly intending on destroying your arm, Midoriya? You won't get very far if you keep saying, I can't modify my quirk, therefore I have no choice. I've said it before, don't make me say it a third time. After you get beyond that barrier, you'll be a lot more adaptable, so I need to see you work hard, Midoriya. Yes, sir. Sweating excessively, Midoriya said. Now let's get on with the homeroom notices. I'm sorry to have to spring this on you all, but we need to pick a class president. Everyone cheered the idea and started raising their hands. Pink Ninja looked around and saw that everyone, including Midoriya, was raising their hands in delight, but she wasn't sure if she really wanted to do something labor-intensive. She was already busy studying for her quirk, so did she even have time to serve as class president? Silence! This is an extremely responsible task where you have to pull and carry the weight of everyone else. You can't do something just because you want to. It is a sacred position that demands the utmost respect and confidence from those around you. A democratic election that reflects the will of the people will produce the only genuinely deserving leader. This is why a vote is required to decide this. Everyone fell silent as Ida yelled, and Pink Ninja laughed. Pink Ninja nodded, listened, and agreed that this would be a great answer. She glanced at Ida and determined that he likely possesses high leadership qualities if he thinks this way. Suya responded, It's still too early to have developed any trust in each other. To the idea. And everyone will just vote for themselves, Kirishima continued. And that's precisely why the person who does manage to earn multiple votes will be the truly appropriate person for the job. No, Ida muttered, before facing the instructor who was in favor of voting. Midoriya Izuku won first place, followed by Yaoyoro Momo. Pink Ninja decided to vote for Ida rather than either because she thought he was the most qualified and liked the idea. Everyone was commenting on the voting process, and Pink Ninja just hummed. It was not surprising that almost everyone had voted for themselves. Yaoyoro was disappointed and Midoriya looked like she was about to throw up. Pink Ninja, who had prepared a bento for lunch at home, was unsure of where to dine today until Kirishima gestured to a table where her classmates were seated. Pink Ninja waved back and grinned. Pink Ninja started to approach the table and put her bento there after noticing that Bakyu, Kirishima, Tokoemi, and Kaminari were sat there. Kirishima grinned and exclaimed, Yo-chan! Hi, Kirishima-kun! The Pink Ninja returned the smile. She was sitting at the table alongside Baku and Kirishima, while Tokoyami and Kaminari were seated across from her. Baku grunted to acknowledge her presence, while Tokoyami and Kaminari nodded toward her. "Wow, I didn't think you would bring homemade food to school," Kirishima said, leaning down and opening her bento. "What do you mean by that, huh?" he asked. The pink ninja raised an eyebrow at that. Kirishima grinned warmly and remarked, "No offense, Chan, but you don't seem like the type to be able to cook your own food." Pink Ninja laughed at the attempt and shoved him aside in joke. "You can try some if you want, it will definitely be poisoned," Pink Ninja said, raising an eyebrow. "Really?" Kirishima asked, and Baku and Tokoyami stopped what they were doing. Kaminari glanced at the two, then at Kirishima and Pink Ninja, sensing a tiny rise in tension. Fearing the worst, Kaminari exclaimed, "I'm gonna go real quick and get some water," and rushed from the table. "You can have some too, you know, Baku-kun, Yami-kun," Pink Ninja remarked, looking up at the other people. "Yami-kun?" Kirishima inquired, before giving Tokoyami and Pink Ninja a knowing look. However, a loud siren sounded across the cafeteria before she could reply. "Security level 3 has been breached. Students, please promptly evacuate." Pink Ninja was pushed next to Kirishima and was unable to see Baku due to the crowd, so she made an uncomfortable face as elbows and shoulders started hitting her. Kirishima noticed and tried to calm everyone down, but it didn't work. Pink Ninja didn't realize what was happening until Baku pulled her from her seat and into a crowd of people trying to leave. "Stop pushing! Will you lay off?" "Wow!" He then moved on to his next idea, which involved grabbing Pink Ninja and embracing her as her shield. Pink Ninja blushed red, unaccustomed to this kind of interaction with someone she didn't know well, but Kirishima didn't seem to mind. When Pink Ninja noticed that Ida had started to float and use his booster in midair, he landed on the exit sign above the door and started yelling. Something about it being the press and nothing was going to happen. After that, things started to calm down and students started to leave the cafeteria. Kirishima grinned and added, Kirishima-kun, you can let me go now," as her flush faded and her discomfort lessened. "Are you okay?" Ida was later voted class president, a choice that almost all of the kids agreed with, Pink Ninja remarked, nodding. For Pink Ninja, the next day was mostly uneventful until hero training in the latter part of the day. For the foundational skill of heroics we'll study today, it decided you'll be supervised by a 3-man team comprising me, All Might, and somebody else, I was stated. "Sensei, what are we going to do?" one of the students said. "This is the rescue trial. Whether it's a flood or another calamity, be the hero that everyone needs." Students started muttering out loud. "Trial of rescue sounds a bit difficult this time around," Kaminari remarked, sighing slightly. Excited for the event, Ashido shouted, "Definitely!" Butted in Kirishima. "Come on, idiot, that's the whole point of being a hero. I can't wait." "If it's a flood, then that environment's my specialty, ribbit," responded Tsuyu. "Don't get ahead of yourselves. As I was saying, this time, it's entirely up to each of you whether or not you wear your costume, and some of your costumes probably aren't adapted to the task at hand, after all," Iwa said, pausing before continuing. "The training area is fairly far away, so we'll get there by bus, that's all, go get prepared." Everyone went to retrieve their equipment as the costumes came out of the wall. Everyone was talking while they waited for the bus to arrive, and Pink Ninja noticed that Midoriya was not wearing his costume. She turned to her left when she heard footsteps nearby, and she grinned at Todoroki when he gave her a tiny nod. "Are you excited, Todoroki-kun?" the Pink Ninja inquired, gazing up at the sky. "It will be very interesting," he remarked. We better move on board, he said after giving her a short tap when he saw the bus come. As he concluded, Ida shouted to the young heroes, "File into 2 lines according to your numbers so that everyone can sit on the bus smoothly." Pink Ninja saw that she was seated next to Shoji Mizo when she boarded the bus, and she soon found that he was a straightforward man who preferred quiet. They struck up a conversation until the folks in the middle of the bus started chatting too loudly. "Hey Midoriya, I always say what I think no matter what's on my mind." Tsuyu started, but Midoriya cut her off. "Your quirk reminds me of All Might's," she added. "That's so. Haha, but mine isn't like Dash," Midoriya said, her face tense. "All Might will never be harmed, so hold on, Ajri. The resemblance ends there. However, I'm a little envious of that kind of basic enhancer kind oddity. With one, you can do a lot of things, and in a stylish way." "I believe it's an amazing quirk," Kirishima replied. "My hardening power isn't horrible for punch-ups, but I hate that it's just not that flashy. Undoubtedly a peculiarity that a professional will find very helpful. Heroics has a lot of elements that are more akin to popularity contests, don't you think?" In response, Aoyama said, "My naval laser is both flashy and strong enough for the pro level." "But it'd be bad if your stomach collapsed," Ashido said with a smile. Pink Ninja giggled a little at the face, and Aoyama returned the deadpan smile. "You can't overlook Todoroki and Bakyu when discussing the double whammy of flamboyant and powerful. But if we're talking about who will be popular, it will probably be," Bakyu said, staring out in shock. Pink Ninja inquired curiously, "Why do you suppose it would be me?" She knew she wasn't very popular, or at least that's what she thought. "You would most likely be well liked because you have a healing quirk and are pleasant when you want to be Chan. Many people appreciate Recovery Girl. But Bakyu's always fuming, so he won't be very popular," Tsuyu said with a smile. "You bitch!" Bakyu shot back. "I'll also be well known," and stood up ferociously. "See," Tsuyu remarked, pointing to him. "It's only been a brief while since our socialization has commenced, and yet already we have been made apolitically cognizant of your personality, redolent as it is of a turd getting steamed in a sewer," Kaminari joked. "What? What on earth is that kind of vocabulary? I'm going to murder you," Bakyu said. Pink Ninja was so bored with the situation that she started to nod off. Her teacher said something, but she ignored it. When they eventually arrived, Pink Ninja's eyes opened in awe. "Universal Studios Japan is really spectacular," she exclaimed, describing the vast training field that was filled with hazard zones, including an earthquake zone, a flood zone, a cave, a fire district, and an area coated in mud. Shoji nodded as he stood by her, and Pink Ninja grinned when she saw Tokoemi come and stand by her too. Pink Ninja prodded Tokoemi a little and looked at his face, but he turned away with a tiny smile. "Flood wrecks, landslides, fires, etc. This is a practical training area I created to simulate all kinds of accidents and disasters, and it's called the ultimate space for jams," the instructor started. "I'm sure you're all already quite aware, but my quirk is called Black Hole. No matter what material may get sucked into its vortex, I'm afraid it will turn into dust." Pink Ninja blushed upon learning that number 13 was his name. She avoided listening in on Iwa's conversation with number 13 and cleared his throat to draw the attention of the students. "Now that's a quirk that's perfect for removing wreckage and saving people injured by disasters," Midoriya said with admiration in his eyes. "Yes, it is, however, a power that could also easily be used to kill people, and in that way, it's no different from the quirks of everyone here. That being said, please don't forget that each of you possesses a quirk that can go awry. One wrong step is all it takes to be able to kill others accidentally, and during All Might's trial of battle I think you took away a true sense of the danger of brandishing those powers against one another." Number 13 looked at the pensive expressions that surrounded him. This lesson will serve as a fresh start. Let's start learning how to use our peculiarities to protect human life. You definitely don't have idiosyncrasies to harm other people. Please make sure you understand that your peculiarities are there to benefit others before you quit this exercise. That's all, the rectangular area said. I appreciate you listening so carefully and patiently. Do not move and huddle together. Number 13, save the students. As Iwa started speaking, Pink Ninja stared in shock before turning to look over his shoulder. What is that? Inquired Kirishima. Is this similar to the entrance exam's rainfall pattern? Don't move! Shouted Iwa, pushing the pupils back. Villains, that is. She glanced at him and then at the villains, but Pink Ninja could only hear one thing they had to say. Pink Ninja heard Iwa murmur to himself, but she couldn't hear what the villains had to say. Pink Ninja heard Yaoyorozu say, I wonder if he'll show up if we kill the kids? As she withdrew from the scene, shaking, paralyzed, and afraid of what might happen. Sensei! How about the sensors for the intruder alarm? In response, Number 13 said, We have some set up, but are they targeting all the other campuses as well, or have they only entered this one? Todoroki calmly replied, staring at the evil. If the sensors aren't responding, then that just means they have one among their number who has a quirk that can do that. Do the evacuation procedure, Number 13. Try phoning the school as well. These bad guys are skilled at evading the sensors. Perhaps an electrowave-type man will try to get in the way. You too, Kaminari. Try sharing your quirk with Yui. In an attempt to stop Iwa-sensei from attacking, Midoriya said, Sensei, will you fight them by yourself? There are a lot of them, even if you ignore all of their peculiarities. Eraserhead uses the strategy of capturing villains after eliminating their peculiarities, thus the big fight begins right now. But before he could engage in combat, Pink Ninja regained her senses and stopped him. A hero always has more than one trick up their sleeves. Number 13, I'm counting on you, exclaimed Iwa. Sensei, please take these. Pink Ninja gave him some sticking pads and made sure they stuck to his arm. These are prototype healing pads I made, and I will be able to heal you from a distance if you get hurt, she continued. He gave her a gloomy smile before starting the fight. She rushed with Midoriya as a black mist suddenly materialized in front of them after Ida seized her and made her leave the scene. I'm afraid I can't allow you to leave. Greetings, we are the Villain Alliance. I apologize for the presumption, but we took it upon ourselves to enter Yui Academy, the base of heroes, in order to engage with Mr. All Might, the symbol of peace. We were wondering if we might be allowed the opportunity to extinguish him, you see. Maybe Mr. All wasn't supposed to be here now. Maybe something has changed. Well, putting everything aside, this is my responsibility, Number 13 remarked, spreading his fingers as the black mist continued to talk. You probably didn't anticipate that we would be able to take you out before you had a chance. Before he could finish, Kirishima and Baki charged forward and utilized their peculiarities on him. Kirishima said, That was quite perilous, to be expected. Though you may be mere students, you are also the hero world's golden eggs. Number 13 threw a few pads on the ground and into the mist, hoping they would reach the others, and before she was sucked up, Pink Ninja heard the black mist utter something. Number 13 tried to speak, but the black mist engulfed them. You will be scattered, and tortured, and slain.